The clatter of hurried footsteps echoed around the crowded train station, a sea of faces moving in waves. Among them, a small girl stood still, her gaze locked on the worn, cracked leather suitcase at her feet. The faded edges and peeling corners whispered stories she wasn't ready to hear, stories tangled with promises and broken silences. A gust of cold wind slipped through the open doors, lifting strands of her dark hair against her pale cheeks. Her hands trembled slightly, fingers curling around the handle of a bright red scarf draped over her wrist, a splash of color in the gray chaos. That scarf had belonged to her mother, a fragile thread connecting her to a past that felt both close and unbearably distant. Behind her, the chatter swelled into laughter, and the scent of birthday cake mixed with the sharpness of winter coats. Everyone was smiling, her mother's friends bustling around with plates of food, her father-in-law's booming voice cutting through the noise, full of jokes no one else seemed to hear the weight in. But then, his whisper. She didn't catch the words, only the way his eyes darkened as they met hers across the room, a shadow passing over the bright celebration. The red scarf trembled in her grip. Was it the cold, or something deeper? Her breath hitched. She wanted to look away, to join the others in their laughter, but her feet were rooted. Her eyes searched the crowd, landing on her daughter, tiny, radiant, perched on a chair, blowing out candles as if they could erase the tension thickening the air. The suitcase at her side felt heavier now, as if it held not just clothes, but secrets wrapped in silence. Her father-in-law's lips moved again, words swallowed by the noise. Yet she heard them in her bones, felt them coil around her heart like a tightening noose. "Be careful what you trust," he murmured. A chill spiraled through her, and the red scarf slipped from her wrist, drifting to the floor like a small, urgent signal. Everyone was still smiling. But for her, the celebration had already fractured. The red scarf lay crumpled at her feet, its vibrant thread tangled in the gray dust of the station floor. She knelt slowly, fingers brushing over the soft fabric, feeling the faint scent of lavender and something older, her mother's scent, a whisper of warmth she hadn't known she missed so much. Her eyes flicked to the cracked leather suitcase beside her, the one she'd clutched all morning like a lifeline. It wasn't just any suitcase. She remembered the first time she'd seen it, years ago, resting under the worn kitchen table in her father's cramped apartment. That suitcase had carried his dreams, and disappointments, across the country. He had said once, his voice low and rough, "This bag holds what matters most. Never let go of it." But her father had gone away, leaving behind more silence than memories. The suitcase, cracked and faded, was the only trace of a man who never quite stayed. Now, it was hers to carry, along with all the weight she couldn't put into words. Around her, the station swirled with movement. Families embracing, children laughing, tears mingling with smiles. She watched a woman reunite with her son, their eyes shining like stars, while another man lifted a small child into his arms, whispering promises that felt fragile and new. Their joy stung, a mirror to the loneliness that clung to her. She wrapped the scarf back around her wrist, fingers trembling again. She was trying, she told herself. Trying to keep her daughter safe. Trying to make a life that wasn't just a series of quiet failures. Bills stacked like thin walls around her, the weight of every unpaid debt pressing down. But no one saw the hours she worked, the nights she stayed awake counting pennies. Her gaze flicked to a man standing a few feet away, quiet, unassuming. He watched her with eyes that didn't flinch, the kind of silence that felt deliberate, almost protective. She wanted to look away but found herself drawn to his steady presence, a strange comfort in the chaos. Her daughter laughed, tugging at her sleeve, pulling her back from the edge of something she couldn't name. The little girl's bright eyes held only innocence, unaware of the tension threading through the room like a fragile wire. The man shifted, a brief flicker of something unreadable crossing his face before he turned away, disappearing into the crowd like a shadow swallowed by light. She blinked, suddenly aware of how alone she felt despite the noise. The suitcase felt heavier now, as if it held not just her clothes but the silent hopes she'd packed away long ago. Her father-in-law's whisper echoed again in her mind, "Be careful what you trust." The words wrapped around her throat, squeezing tight. What did he mean? Was it a warning, or a threat hidden beneath the surface of polite smiles? Her daughter tugged her hand again, and she forced a smile, lifting the girl into her arms. The weight of the day, of all the things unspoken, pressed down like a storm ready to break. At the station's edge, the announcement called for the next train, her train. She hesitated, heart pounding in her ears, caught between leaving and staying, between the past she carried and the future she couldn't see. The red scarf slipped again from her wrist, fluttering like a small flame in the wind. She reached down to catch it, but paused, eyes meeting the stranger's once more, a silent question hanging between them. And then, a hesitant smile flickered on her lips, uncertain and fragile, like the promise of dawn after a long, dark night. The sky darkened suddenly, a low rumble of thunder rolling over the station rooftops as a sharp wind tugged at her coat. Raindrops began to fall, slow at first, then faster, speckling the cracked leather of the suitcase, soaking the red scarf wrapped around her wrist. She shivered, the chill biting deep, but her eyes remained fixed on the man across from her. He stood under the station's weathered canopy, hands stuffed deep in the pockets of a threadbare coat. His shoes were scuffed and worn, old enough to have walked through storms no one ever talked about. A faint crease at the corner of his mouth hinted at years of quiet endurance. When he shifted, a small leather wallet slipped from his pocket and fell to the ground with a soft thud. She bent to pick it up before he could. Opening it carefully, she found a faded photograph tucked inside, an old black and white of a woman smiling softly, holding a child that looked no older than her daughter. The edges were curled, worn like the suitcase she carried. She felt a sudden, sharp pang of recognition, not just of the photo, but of the story it whispered. A story of loss. Of love. Of lives shattered and pieced back together by sheer will. For a moment, the noise of the station faded. The rain drummed a steady rhythm, a heartbeat echoing the turmoil swelling inside her. She saw herself in him, two souls marked by absence, by a past that clawed at the present with invisible fingers. She felt the weight of her own struggle mirrored in his silence, a reflection she hadn't expected to find in a stranger's worn eyes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She needed to leave, to catch the train that would take her and her daughter away from this place, from the cryptic warnings whispered in a crowded room. Yet, something anchored her, a fragile tether woven from unspoken understanding and a desperate hope she barely dared admit. The rain grew heavier, blurring the edges of the world around them. Thunder cracked overhead, splitting the sky as if the heavens themselves were torn by the storm inside her. She glanced at her daughter, tucked safely under her coat, eyes wide but trusting. The suitcase felt heavier now, not just a vessel for belongings but a symbol of the burdens she carried. Could she really let go of everything? Could she face what lay ahead alone? The man's gaze caught hers again, steady and unyielding. Was it fate that had brought them here, or something darker, a manipulation cloaked in quiet empathy? The question hung between them, heavy and unresolved. He spoke then, his voice low, almost a whisper against the rain. Sometimes the hardest journeys aren't about the miles traveled. They're about the ghosts we carry. She wanted to ask what ghosts he meant. Wanted to know if he understood the secrets bound in her suitcase, the fragile threads of trust she was desperate to protect. But the words caught in her throat, swallowed by the storm's roar. The announcement for her train crackled over the loudspeaker, a sudden jolt pulling her back to the present. The platform was slick with rain, the crowd beginning to stir with urgency. She took a slow, shaky breath, torn between the impulse to run and the strange comfort of this quiet stranger's presence. Her fingers tightened around the red scarf, soaked and heavy now, a burning reminder of what she might lose, or find. The rain fell harder, washing over them both, as she took a step forward, and then hesitated. Her eyes met his one last time, searching for an answer that didn't come. The train was waiting, but so was the unknown. The rain had turned into a relentless curtain, washing the station clean but doing nothing to soothe the storm raging inside her. She gripped the soaked red scarf tighter, its fabric clinging to her fingers like a stubborn memory she couldn't shake. The suitcase sat heavy beside her, the worn leather now slick with rain, its cracks deepening as if reflecting the fractures in her own heart. Her daughter tugged at her coat sleeve, her small voice barely rising above the noise. "Mom, are we leaving now?" The question felt like a thread unraveling her resolve. She took a step forward, her boots splashing through puddles, the train's whistle calling them home, or away, from everything she'd known. But then she stopped, breath catching like a bird trapped against glass. Behind her, a pair of sharp eyes watched, a woman clutching a designer handbag, her lips pressing into a thin line as she whispered to a friend, "Look at her, alone in this storm. What kind of life is that for a child?" The judgment was invisible but heavy, hanging in the air like the damp cold that seeped into her bones. The murmurs of the crowd, the sideways glances, the half-smiles of pity, none of it touched her, and yet all of it pressed down like weight on fragile wings. She closed her eyes, the image of her father-in-law's whisper returning, the warning buried in a voice meant only for her ears. "Be careful what you trust." Trust. A word that felt like glass shards in her chest. Suddenly, a soft movement caught her attention. The stranger stepped forward, the rain dripping from his worn coat. In his hand, held out to her with quiet reverence, was the red scarf, now more than a scrap of fabric. It was a symbol of survival, of memories folded into every thread, of love tangled with loss. She hesitated, reaching out as if to take it, but the moment hung suspended, too fragile to grasp fully, too raw to let go. His eyes held a flicker of something unspoken, maybe compassion, maybe a mirror of his own wounds. "Some people carry more than just bags," his voice was a soft echo in the storm, "they carry silence. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest thing." The words wrapped around her like a fragile shield, both balm and burden. She looked down at the scarf, then back into his eyes, searching for a sign, hope, betrayal, something that would make sense of this strange encounter. Behind them, the world rushed on. Passengers huddled under umbrellas, conversations buzzing, footsteps pounding, but in this small, rain-drenched space, time slowed. Her daughter's small hand slipped into hers, a quiet anchor in the swirling chaos. The woman with the sharp eyes crossed her arms tighter, casting one last glance, half disdain, half sorrow. Society's invisible lines drawn around them, defining who belonged and who didn't, who was worthy of trust and who was not. Her breath hitched. She wanted to turn away, to step onto the train and vanish into the hum of routine. But her feet refused, rooted in the weight of the moment, the whispered truths, the unseen scars shared between two strangers. The rain softened to a gentle drizzle, the storm outside mirroring the one inside her, a tempest waiting to break, a secret too heavy to carry alone. And so she stood, caught between what was and what could be, between silence and speech, between leaving and staying. The scarf slipped from his hand, drifting down like a feather onto the wet ground. She reached for it, not yet ready to hold it, but unwilling to let it fall away. Her eyes met his once more, unanswered, uncertain, and full of the kind of pain that doesn't heal with time, only with truth. And with that, the moment shattered, leaving only the sound of rain and the beating of two hesitant hearts, suspended on the edge of something neither dared to name. The red scarf lay heavy in her hand, soaked through but pulsing with meaning she hadn't fully grasped. She barely noticed the rain slowing to a soft mist as the stranger spoke again, his voice low but steady. "That scarf belonged to my daughter," he said quietly, eyes darkening with something raw and unspoken. "She passed away 2 years ago. It was the last thing she wore." The words landed like a thunderclap, sharp and impossible to ignore. Her breath caught, memories flooding back, the way her own daughter's laughter had filled their tiny apartment just hours before, the fragile line between joy and grief she was constantly walking. Her fingers tightened around the fabric. This wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was a connection, two broken families tangled by loss and silence. She glanced at him, searching for answers in his guarded expression. The scar in his voice deepened, but beneath it was something else, an unyielding resolve. "Why are you here?" she whispered, the question heavier than the rain. He hesitated, then pulled from his coat a sleek business card, sliding it into her palm. The logo gleamed under the dim station lights, Harrison Holdings. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Harrison Holdings, the company she'd applied to weeks ago, the one that could change everything for her and her daughter. The job she'd dreamed of, a chance to escape the cycle of struggle. She stared at the card, the weight of her world shifting beneath her feet. "You're the owner?" The words slipped out, disbelief and hope colliding. He nodded, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "I'm a lot of things, but most days I feel like I'm just holding on. That scarf, it's a reminder. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence." The phrase echoed in her mind, the same words he'd whispered earlier, now heavy with new meaning. Time seemed to fold back on itself, wrapping them both in a loop of pain and possibility. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She realized, in that moment, she had crossed an invisible line. There was no going back to the life she'd known. The past she'd tried to leave behind was entwined with a future she hadn't expected. Her daughter tugged at her coat again, innocence untouched by the weight of secrets and broken promises. With trembling hands, she folded the scarf carefully, feeling the threads pull tight like the invisible bonds now linking their lives. The stranger stepped aside, gesturing toward a nearby doorway, the entrance to Harrison Holdings' private office. The invitation was silent but clear. She hesitated, the flood of emotions crashing through her, fear, hope, grief, and something else. A chance. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, suitcase in one hand, red scarf wrapped around the other. Behind her, the rain softened to a gentle patter, the storm outside quieting as if holding its breath. She crossed the threshold into a room that would change everything. And with that, the past and future collided, unpredictable, raw, and waiting to be rewritten. The office was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint drip of rain tracing patterns on the windowpane. She stood at the threshold, suitcase in hand, the red scarf folded neatly inside her coat pocket. It felt heavier now, weighted with meaning she still couldn't fully untangle. He sat behind a polished desk, the man who held power and pain tangled in his sharp gaze. But when he looked at her, it wasn't with the hope she'd imagined. Instead, there was something colder, distant, like a mirror reflecting a ghost. "You remind me of her," he said softly, voice thick with something she couldn't name. "Not because of your daughter, because of your fight, your silence. The same way she carried hers." The words hit her like a wave crashing against cliffs, fierce, undeniable, and yet hollow. She had hoped for connection, for rescue. Instead, she found reflection. His hand reached into a drawer and pulled out the red scarf. He held it between them, a fragile thread linking past and present. This belonged to her. "I've kept it all this time, hoping it might hold some part of her back." She swallowed hard, the tears threatening to spill. "I never meant to take it from you. I only wanted to hold on to something real." He nodded, the weight of years pressing into the silence between them. Slowly, he extended the scarf toward her. "Keep it. But not as a chain. As a reminder that some wounds heal only when we choose to let go." She took it, fingers trembling, the fabric warm despite the chill. It was a surrender, a gift wrapped in loss and hope. Outside, the rain had stopped. The station was empty now, the echo of footsteps long gone. She remembered the first moment, the girl watching the suitcase, the scarf slipping from her wrist, the whispered warning. Now, the roles had reversed. She was no longer the silent observer but the woman holding pieces of a broken past, ready to step into an uncertain future. Her daughter's laughter echoed in her mind, a fragile light piercing through the shadows. "I'm giving up the job," she said quietly, eyes meeting his. "Not because I don't want it, but because I need to find a life that's mine, without borrowing someone else's grief." He studied her, a flicker of something like respect softening his gaze. "Then maybe this is how we both begin to heal," he said. She nodded, feeling a strange peace settle over her. The suitcase at her feet wasn't just a container of things, it was the vessel of sacrifice and rebirth. Turning away from the desk, she stepped toward the door, the red scarf wrapped tight around her wrist once more. Outside, the train station awaited, not as a place of endings, but as a threshold of new beginnings. And as she crossed into the night, the weight on her shoulders lifted, not because the past was gone, but because she had chosen what to carry forward. Some people carry more than just bags. Sometimes, they carry silence. And sometimes, letting that silence go is the bravest journey of all.